Hey everyone, welcome to the the grand finale of our cybersecurity track. Thank you so much, Tatu, for ending this at a high. Tatu's very experienced. We've known each other for I don't know how many years now, but I think he's one of the most experienced cybersecurity professionals that I know about, and I think. Yeah, you're in great hands. With that, I give it over to Tatu.
Yeah, so welcome everyone. It's 4 o'clock in Finland. I'm currently in Scotland, Aberdeen right now, but that doesn't mean anything these days. It's 2024 and physical location doesn't matter anymore. Happy to be joining you to share experiences. This is not going to be an info dump. I'm not going to be reading out loud piles of documentation at you. Nobody wants that at this hour. I'm going to share some experiences and how I see the architect mindsets, how I see the job of a cybersecurity architect, and how it could help you where you are right now. That's why we're here, right? To pick up new skills and learn something and use it. So we're going to be talking about, but taking a different angle. I'm not going to go too deep into technical details and info dumps. So I'm going to start with a video game. It's 4 o'clock, so it's a good place to start. This is a game called Transport Tycoon. It's still available today. It's a game where you build railroad tracks and bus infrastructure and airplanes and all kinds of systems and try to move people and mail around and get paid to build bigger trains and tracks and systems. So why am I showing this to you? Well, that's because this is probably the first game I got really hooked on as a kid. Had this on our home PC, and I actually blame this game for the fact that I'm actually an architect right now, 2024. Some, I don't know, 30 years later, almost 25 at least. There's a lot of similarity between just under the surface between some of these games and how a cybersecurity architect and a technology architect in general thinks and works. We're gonna tie this into what I talk about today. Security architecture is about looking at systems and about the big picture, not on the details. In this game, you don't really build a single bus. You build systems to interact with each other that you update over time. You might add a better train to an existing track, for example, to make things run better. You identify places where a new road is required. That's much of what architecture is all about. We might return to this game for a little bit at the end, but it's really a kind of allegory to what an architect is. This is what the British government says about what a security architect's job is. Their official kind of dry definition is that an architect creates and designs security and develops patterns and security approaches. That's all true. However, I do think they leave out the main part of what a security architect really does. The main part of what a security architect really does is the first thing I'll try to get to early on. I won't spoil it yet. I'm going to try to cover a few topics today. Some of it you might have been reading about a little bit in your materials. I'm going to touch on how those are relevant in my opinion, or my experience rather. Things like different frameworks, but what the importance of having a zero trust mindset is in this job, how risk management is relevant, what a roadmap is, and how you might be able to build one or in your life. We're gonna try to tie everything up with how having this kind of systems-focused architect mindset will be beneficial to you, even if you're not currently working as a cybersecurity architect. It's a mindset that anyone can have, that I personally had way before that I worked as one. But yeah, what do I think the key aspects of my work is? I'm not going to have too many slides with text. I'm just going to try to keep it to a minimum, but I'm going to have one here. When I think about how I work day to day as an architect, maybe the most important thing, my work and the most important thing as a security architect for me is actually not tech at all. It's communication. It is the most fundamental things that helps me succeed, and when I fail, it's usually all about communication as well. So the job of an architect is essentially to work between people in business and the technical experts, listening to one, translating it with their own opinions and experience mixed into something the other can understand, essentially. That's what an architect does in the security space also. It's a key part, listening to non-technical and technical people and working as a mediator in some ways. What I do day to day a lot is keeping up with the latest trends. Cybersecurity is kind of a really living beast. Every half a year brings within a new trend. For example, you might remember something like, I don't know, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe in 3 years ago, everybody was talking about you need to enable multi-factor strong authentication, two-factor authentication. They were right. And the message back then was, well, you do this and almost 99.9% of all threats will be handled, which was for that moment true. However, a couple of years later, real-life attackers switched tactics, and now there's different kinds of attacks that don't require where multi-factor authentication doesn't help. So now we're on to the next thing. So you kind of, as a security architect, I keep reading news every single day. I actually had to build my own tool to do it because there's so many sources. At least when I'm working with Microsoft Tech a lot, there's a million different blogs, news feeds, and everything you can get vital information on. So I actually had to build custom tools. You don't need to do this, but I had to for myself build custom tools to track news. It's a key part of my job, actually. And why is it important? Well, we'll get to that in a bit when we talk about roadmaps and we talk about listening to business. So if we think about the core task of an architect, it really is to interpret non-technical requirements from business and risk management and others, sometimes legal, even HR, into actual security solutions. Because the people that come up with the requirements don't know the tech, and the people that don't know the tech don't really know the requirements or the business. So that's where a security architect works. There are other roles to work between business and technical people as well, but that's one. The tools I often turn to when I need to, especially when I'm working with something I'm not that experienced with yet. Architects aren't deep technical gurus in every area because that's impossible. I turn to reference architectures. You might have had them mentioned in your material. And also sets of best practices and frameworks like a cloud adoption framework and others. We'll talk about them today. Because we're human, and no matter how good you are, you're not going to be the best super expert in absolutely everything as an architect you're working on. So when I work with customers, especially, I'm kind of a consultant right now, so I'm not working for any single company. A lot of what an architect ends up doing is looking at a whole bunch of things we could do and deciding, looking at business and looking what the risks are, understanding what the greatest risks are, making calls on what we need to spend our precious time on right now. That involves things like, modeling threats. What's actually, which threats are the greatest one for right now to handle, and where should we spend money out of all the possible things we could do. And since I mentioned that, as a cybersecurity architect, I'm not going to be able to be a deep expert in absolutely everything. An essential thing and a skill for architects is to, yes, work with other people, the people who are experts in a specific narrow field. So it's not a lone wolf job, really. You need some social skills as an architect, I think. This is my experience. You might hear a different set of priorities from some other architect. But yeah, I mentioned news. There are all kinds of, there's way more information aimed at architects, especially out there, than it's possible to ingest and understand. I do like to follow a few as a security architect. Because I work in the Microsoft space, there are other vendors like Google and millions of others. I work in the Microsoft space, so I like to read, especially stuff related to them. Just a few days or weeks ago, if you want to take a look, I added a link. I'll share the materials. I actually dropped the link maybe in the chat also. I can probably get it from here. No? Well, if you want to get this report specifically here, it's available online. It's the Microsoft Digital Defense Report 2024, and it's not all technological. There's some tech in there, but there's also things that are interesting to read from a common person's perspective. What's happening in the world right now? What are North Korea and China doing, to our computers, all of that stuff. So this is what I have to and want to also read all the time. First, I read these reports, maybe 40, maybe 60 pages with a cup of coffee, spend a while thinking about how this affects the organizations I work with, and if it affects them, the newest trends, and then I go talk to them, suggest things. It's really you never get bored as a cybersecurity architect. Thanks, Milia, for linking also that. You've been very helpful. So yeah, essentially you're here to learn something and spending your valuable time here. So I'm going to try to kind of spend that time wisely by showing you a comic. I'm just kidding. Essentially, the role of an architect, as I said, is to talk with business decision makers, business risk management professionals, non-technical people, and translate it to technical requirements. So sometimes it's kind of like this in my everyday, where there's this manager going like, I need to know why doing this single thing doesn't make us secure. It was supposed to make us secure. We have multi-factor authentication for everyone. Why aren't we secure yet? Why do we need to spend more money? Then as an architect, I kind of need to try to, without going into tech jargon, to just explain that, security is a multifaceted thing, that we have these applications, we have all these networks, we have all these devices, and not everything happens even through our user accounts. Every threat doesn't materialize through those, so there's still things to do. Sometimes business decision makers don't agree, and I need to do a little bit more to convince them. Sometimes it's enough to communicate clearly, but if you work as a technical person and not as an architect, you might never have to face these situations where you can just work on tech and implementing things and not really grapple with people who don't necessarily understand why you need to do what you do. But if you're okay with, as an architect, if you're okay with negotiating with people who are not technical and explaining things and having a positive attitude, then you might be fit to be an architect, I guess. So you essentially need a layer of people between the real deep technical experts and leadership. So people with experience, people with opinions, who see the big picture, like in the game I showed you. Don't focus on one train, but rather the city with all its buses and trains and roads. Who sit both with the technical experts, their table, and business and technical leadership. Yeah, that's really what an architect is in cybersecurity. There are a lot of frameworks. You might have heard about some of these. There's I don't use every single framework all the time, by the way, but you might have heard about a few. In the Microsoft space, there's things like the Cloud Adoption Framework. There's well-architected framework as well for Azure. And Microsoft also offers the Cloud Security Benchmark and many others. But my opinion on these is frameworks are basically it's documentation on the big picture. How is an entire organization's cloud service, the whole, how should it be built and secured, essentially, covering all the aspects, the ones you know about and the ones you don't know about. All of these are documented well online, but what I do like about them is when I'm faced with having to faced with an area I don't have that much experience on personally. Let's say application security. I can then turn to one of these frameworks. I do like the Cloud Adoption Framework a lot, and pull well-organized best practices from there that aren't just some guy's opinion, but that are commonly recognized, good practices I can use. And I can kind of trust these frameworks to fill in the gaps in my own knowledge when I'm talking with organizations on how to design something. You can't blindly trust them either, by the way, because there's real life, and real life doesn't always mesh perfectly with these frameworks and how they do things. Yep, just commenting, just reading from chat, by the way. Never heard anything from you, Emilia, through the mic, so no worries. But there's a bunch of best practice documentation. In general, I would recommend if you want to work as a technical specialist, if you want to work as an architect also, I would recommend looking through those. It's not important to memorize them, though. You can pull these up when you actually need them. If you're covering an area you're not 100% confident on. And especially if you are 100% confident, it's a good idea to take a look at what the best practices in this framework say you should be doing. There might be something you've missed. But if you wake me up at 3 a.m., I will not be able to list you everything in the Cloud Adoption Framework, even if you paid me to do it, because there's so much information in these frameworks. There's many, and they're large. Also, frameworks for zero trust, which we'll talk about in a bit. All kinds, and I remember actually, I'm gonna get to something just a second. If you want to get a heart attack as a on your first day as a security architect, pull up the Microsoft CyberSecurity reference architecture. I was going to actually start with this as a joke today and say that here's what we're going to cover today. So this is, I'm just going to show you this as kind of not for the purpose of explaining what's in it, but as a cybersecurity architect, you're kind of not expected to know everything in this picture down on a deep level, but it's very useful if you understand the role of each of these technology areas. Think about the city in the video game. If you kind of look at this picture and instead of all of these boxes with text in them, there's buildings and all the little lines are roads. It's like looking at a city, right? You don't need to understand every single little detail, but you need to understand how the city works. Where does the plumbing go? That's why these reference architectures are important. They kind of help you understand the big picture. What else is happening around the area you're working on? Maybe we're working on information protection, for example, securing data and files. Well, looking at the reference architecture, you'll see that there's also tie-ins to something called conditional access. There's adjacent technology from, let's say, people security that you might want to consider looking at when you're working in information protection. So you kind of see what else is out there that's relevant that you might not know about. That is why these reference architectures are there. They explain what the role of everything in the technology stack, let's say, is in the big picture. But again, I don't memorize this information. It's not important to know all of this by heart. What I've been enjoying myself is talking sometimes about what not to do also. Best practices can be, they can be idealistic sometimes. I like to sometimes just highlight things we do every day that negatively affect security, even though we don't intend to. IT in a lot of organizations does a whole lot of stuff that's not beneficial to security because, well, a lot of reasons, from lack of processes to lack of resources to all kinds of reasons. So having an idea of what really goes wrong every day in real life, instead of just looking at best practices and this idealistic world where everything is already secured, is useful as an architect. Being kind of grounded in reality. For example, I'm just going to tell a story that has very little to do with the slide right now. The slides are just for, talking points. I can tell you a little story about blocking things. So I was designing kind of information protection solution for, a solution that lets people indicate if a document or file is confidential, or an email is confidential by clicking on a button in Word or Excel. And we were discussing on what this should actually mean if a document or file is confidential. This was maybe a year back. And I was talking with the customer's security, and we had a couple of people there helping, working on this with me. We had the customer's cybersecurity responsible. We had someone from HR, someone from legal, so non-technical people involved in this discussion. And I kind of asked the question, okay, people are now indicating these documents are confidential. What should that mean? What should they be allowed and not allowed to do? So cybersecurity chief had pretty strong opinion. Let's block almost everything. So no copying the USB drives, no uploading to cloud services, anything, no this, block that, stop this, stop that, and then we're secure. HR and legal were kind of horrified because they are everyday non-technical people. And I also had enough experience at that point to look at him a little bit amused and ask him this one question, which is, and you can ask this yourself, if somebody all of a sudden blocks you from doing something you think you need to do, what happens then? So sometimes high-level decision makers in cybersecurity above the architect might have an idealistic view where if you block something, then that's it. End of story. However, you usually end up as an architect coming up through, maybe even from the end user, maybe even service desk like myself. And I had enough experience to say that what really happens when we just all of a sudden start blocking things is people get creative, right? Usually people come up with some way of doing a thing that's even worse than what they were trying to do originally. Maybe taking pictures of the screen or something like that. So as an architect, it was kind of my job to go, okay, well, I can kind of hear our requirement here to limit what people can do and should do with this confidential information. How about we start with explaining to them why it's important to handle this information carefully and then go from there, and not start with the technical, block everything type of approach. And the cybersecurity responsible was like, okay. So we spent months just communicating and slowly building up some restrictions. But essentially, as an architect, you need to sometimes be the voice of reason with experience and kind of see the big picture and how what you design really affects the business, the real life. So it's often about looking at what's going on in an organization at a specific time and noticing some, let's say, possible issues like okay, workstations, PCs, and Macs are not being updated regularly. Well, it's not a problem. It hasn't been a problem so far, but it's going to become a problem eventually. Or there's not enough people to handle. Like for example, I have this saying. This applies to everything. A process cannot have a first name and a last name. If a process in security, like approving something or investigating something, is down to one person who always does it, it's not a process. It's just a person. So this kind of when you work as an architect, or even if you don't, noting these kind of issues and raising them and suggesting some alternative is a lot of what you do. Like being proactive, basically. So for security specifically, I just want to mention a specific framework. One of those most important ones, which is not by Microsoft or anything, it's called MITRE. Well, it's attack, but the second A is an and sign. I don't remember what it actually stands for, the abbreviation, but it's a pretty interesting thing to look at. It's kind of a matrix of all the kinds of specific things, not specific techniques that real attackers, cyber attackers, use when they try to get into a system, into your services, and what they do after they get in. It makes for really interesting reading. It's it's just glancing around what kinds of routes there are, what kinds of paths there are to actually attack a system. It's anything from calling you up on your phone and pretending to be so and so, from really technical stuff. Gathering information from LinkedIn and all of this. It kind of opens your eyes to how varied the actual threats are compared to what we think popularly every day. We think of, oh, I clicked the wrong link in my email and now I'm hacked. Well, yes, but that's only one of 100 real situations that could happen that you kind of need to account for. So I suggest looking at that. You don't need to memorize any of this stuff. As long as you remember the Mitre attack framework that you can use to identify things to look at least when you're securing a system. I mentioned the Microsoft CyberSecurity reference architecture as an aid. It's called MCRA because IT people love 3 or 4 letter acronyms. You can find it at it's a whole slide deck full of these visuals. This is the heaviest visual of them all, by the way. Some of them look like video games, but it's full of very useful visuals for explaining things to others around cybersecurity. It's a useful toolkit. I recommend it if you're working in the Microsoft space. If you're not, then probably less so. It's basically a tool among others. I don't really work through just these frameworks and architectures, as I mentioned. They're just an aid. Mostly I work through my experience and judgment. There's probably a good point to talk about zero trust. You're going to hear the word zero trust as an architect, not just an architect, but if you work in cybersecurity in by any measure, you're going to hear about zero trust. And I think it's probably best to kind of sum it up without going technical stuff. And before we go into even the funny definition of an accurate definition of zero trust, I just want to point out what Ida said in chat. Ida said that, just sharing this in case someone would be interested. I watched this video by a penetration tester a few days ago, and some of the things said here really go well with what Tatu is sharing now. I do recommend, I find those videos by penetration testers who work with people to be really eye-opening. And that's really, penetration testing and zero trust kind of go hand in hand, funnily. Penetration testing means, if it's physical penetration testing, it means sneaking into buildings behind others and, getting into physical spaces. It used to be called burglary, but now when they use those same skills in within contract, you might get paid for it if you do it ethically and with a contract and agreement. It's really interesting. But zero trust, essentially, what it essentially means, I think it's kind of a terrible term because zero trust sounds like nobody should trust anyone. What it really means is we validate as many things about a person, an application, a device as possible. We validate and look at as many factors as possible and don't trust any single thing. One of those penetration testing stories, I listened to a podcast called Darknet Diaries, by the way, a lot. I'm going to recommend it. I'm going to type it here. It has a lot of penetration testing stories and other cybersecurity stories. One of the, let me just type this. a great episode of Darknet Diaries is something called Beirut Bank Job. It's one of those older episodes. Tells a story of penetration tester who was hired to basically test physical security of banks in Beirut. And one of the things they did was that they snuck into. They made up a story that they have walked into a bank, made up a story that they have an appointment with the manager. So they got to walk into the back room to wait at the manager's office door. Waited there for about 5 to 10 minutes. Put on, I think, some kind of slightly different clothes. And then walked from the direction of the back rooms to the front of the bank and said they were specialists sent by the bank company to investigate the security of the workstation PCs over there behind the counter. And because this person was coming from the direction that was trusted, from the manager's office direction, the back office, employees just said, okay, you're clearly coming from the employee side, so I guess you're good. Just here, go nuts on my computer. And this was a case of zero trust. All the employees really looked at was a single factor: where this person is actually coming from the back office. Okay, so they must be legitimate because the customers don't ever get there. And if they had actually used zero trust principles, they would have verified a lot of things about the person before letting them do anything. Their identification, their backstory, all of that. So zero trust in a computer system, and architects needs to know this, is all about just finding new things to validate about you, people, and other applications and devices. Not just whether you have the right password and you completed multi-factor authentication, but also what country you're coming from. Are you using a device that's trusted by the organization? And also, by the way, another part of zero trust, we don't want to give people any more permissions than they really need. I think actually, now that I think back to it, I think everybody knows Edward Snowden in the world. Edward Snowden, famous whistleblower. I read his autobiography, and I think Edward Snowden was actually a Microsoft SharePoint administrator for the government, for the NSA at some point, if I remember correctly, when he was, I think, at Hawaii. Meaning had all the privileges to all of the information in that platform. And that having that kind of giving people wide-ranging access means wide-ranging risk as well. So a key part of zero trust an architect needs to design for is only giving as much permissions as is actually needed. If any of you have changed jobs within the same company, let's do a round of hands. If anybody's still awake, it's 4:40 p.m. in Finland. Who here has changed jobs at least once within the same company in their life? Same company, one person. So another one. Okay, many people. So when you change jobs within the same company, did you ever check if your permissions to files and other places from your previous role were ever removed? Like file shares, file sites. Do you remember? Were they removed? They were not. That's what often really happens. People, especially sometimes, work in really high privileged roles, and then they switch jobs and nobody bothers to remove the old privileges. So now they have access to everything they used to have and all the new stuff as well. And sometimes what they used to have access to is a whole lot. For example, myself, in many organizations I don't even directly work for, I have access that lets me essentially, if I was a malicious actor, I would access every single file everywhere in Microsoft ecosystem. So when I leave, I really try to make sure that they remove my account. And architects needs to take these kind of things into account and sometimes either personally put in place systems or encourage others to put in place systems to remove access after it's no longer necessary. That's a lot of what least privilege access. It's a part of zero trust principles. It's what it's all about. Yeah, Suvi says that I'm still waiting for that they would remove rights for one workspace. I'm counting the months. Yeah, that's right. It's a good thing you probably aren't a malicious actor. I mean, if you are, you probably won't tell us. So, of course, I'm kidding. The third pillar of that I like to kind of keep in mind, because it's not always easy. From zero, I think the principles are really good. The third key pillar is to basically already assume that somebody has hacked the organization you're working for, that somebody is already there. It's kind of a tough mind state to get yourself in because we want to feel safe as people. But as an architect, you have to design around you have to start from the idea that somebody is already there, that they already have a user account, they already have the ability to even perform multi-factor authentication, and try to design systems so that it's as difficult as possible for this person, hypothetical attacker, to move around and get access to things they shouldn't have. Sometimes you know the official term expression for this is to assume breach, and I think it's a fair mindset. Like I said, I'm currently in Aberdeen, Scotland right now. I'm not in the company network. I am connected to company services, but let's face it, it's especially after 2020, there is no company network for most companies. Okay, they might make you use a VPN in some companies, but they still probably let you do some things on your home device. And if not, there's usually the mobile devices, and especially after you connect that VPN, on a work device, then it's all bets are off. You're inside the coconut, let's say, you're through the hard shell, and most organizations still, after you get through that hard shell, whether it be a firewall or VPN, it's all soft and squishy in there. So I think I heard from there's two guys in Finland, very senior security people. Maybe you've heard of them. There's Mikko Hyppänen from WithSecure, and then there's Tomi Tuominen, also another security person. They have a podcast called Herrasmieshakkerit. I recommend it. A few years ago, they did an episode on zero trust principles, and I think Tomi was the one who coined this expression of coconut defense, or in Finnish kookospähkinäpuolustus, where you have a really hard, impressive array of security measures on the edge of your system, like super firewall and all this multi-factor authentication, and after that, there's nothing, because we trust that single point of security. And that doesn't work anymore nowadays. And a security architect needs to understand that. So we need to think more like this. There was actually another term coined by one of my old colleagues. I don't know if he wants his name to be said out loud, so I'm not going to say who he is, but one of my old colleagues, a really smart guy, he had this term onion defense. It's kind of a pivot from coconut defense. He talked about onion defense, layering defenses in every layer of the system, whether it be, the outer edge where we had all the firewalls, whether it be your device you're working on right now, whether it be your identity, who you actually are, having really strong multi-factor authentication, like biometric authentication, even better, some passkeys and things like that, whether it be data, encrypting the actual ultimate documents that attackers are trying to get to so they can't open them, whether it be the apps themselves. This is ultimately what zero trust as an architect means for you. It means that you need to really look critically at every layer of the system you're working with, the city. Think about the city again, every layer of that city. And think about what we can do here to make it a little bit harder for that attacker we think is already there to cause damage or get access to the good stuff that they want to get access to. And unfortunately, the real life scenario is that we have all these ideas, and then we need to convince people who aren't really, their job is something other than security, to invest money in security, which is a traditional issue. It's a traditional issue in security to get budgets. Basically, something bad has to happen first, until the mindset is, that there's no need to invest in security because nothing's happening, and we're already secure, and security people are just always paranoid. Then something happens, business yells at security, why haven't you done anything? Why haven't you secured it? Security says, well, we didn't get the budgets we asked for last year. Then business says, well, here's the budget, fix everything. And then we move things onward a little bit again. This is changing now due to many reasons. It's changing now not only because of people's mindsets, but because of legislation and regulation, finally. I don't know if you've heard about it, but actually, I think yesterday, the 16th of October, if I remember correctly, the NIS2 directive, it's not a law yet, but it's a EU level directive, came into play in Europe, which is a directive. Directive means that each EU country is required to pass some kind of law with certain characteristics around this, around cybersecurity. It is a law that mandates companies, critical companies, which is a lot of companies in Finland that fall under this umbrella, to basically invest in cybersecurity, or leadership in that company might ultimately be personally responsible under some circumstances for not investing in security. There's a lot of requirements from regulation as an architect you need to account for. I'm gonna see if I can actually demo something for you here, because it's not all about slides. Sorry that it took this long to actually get to demo something. I was supposed to earlier, but I kind of kept on going. So the NIS2 directive is one of those actual regulations. There's, of course, the GDPR dealing with personal data, and for financial organizations, there's DORA, for example, which is another European cybersecurity. It's a regulation. But Microsoft's systems are what I'm showing you here right now. Just as an example, this is what I often use as an architect. There's a tool called Compliance Manager. It's a tool to let me actually look at the current environment against a regulation and its requirements, to see which of the requirements we already fulfill and which ones we do not. And NIS2 is one of those laws that's modeled here. Well, it's not it's a directive, but it will be a law in Finland once they actually legislate it. And I can already look at which types of requirements does it bring into the table for, let's say, my organization. So I can figure out if we actually are, let's see which ones we're failing right now in this organization. There's at least one requirement that, according to this assessment tool, we are not fulfilling yet. Some of the requirements are technical, and some of the requirements are process related, and some of them even related to just paperwork that needs to be done. So as a cybersecurity architect, I would look at a bunch of these assessments and frameworks and try to figure out what we're actually mandated to do by law also. There's not just the things we want to do because of risk. There's things we want to do because we're required to by regulation. So you kind of need to balance both things out as an architect. In this case, we would need to, I guess, set up a process for, I'll be honest, I don't even actually know what the details of this process to allow technical requests by some cooperation group means. I have to look into it. It's a common situation, and I don't always know everything. So as an architect, you need to kind of look at both what was required by law and what the organization wants to do and needs to do because of risk. And you need, because of all of these requirements, they are paid from the same money, essentially. And there's only a limited amount of money in real life. You need to prioritize. Now, I know you've been here listening to me for a good while now, and I'm very thankful for it. I'm sure there's a lot of other things in life we could all be doing, but we're all here. I think it's a nice thing. So if there's one of the few things I would say anyone can use immediately, if you're working with technology and if you're working with security, security is really risk management. If nobody has ever told you this before, then I'm going to do it now. Security is risk management. We're going to wrap up by 5, by the way, don't worry. That's what security is, and that's what an architect a lot of the time, like myself, does. We look at, what the gaps are, we think, in the organization, what needs the most work, and we assign a risk level to it based on how likely it is that this risk actually happens. If the risk is that somebody spills coffee in the morning, then the risk is pretty high when you have 1,000 people. If there's only 2 people, then the risk is relatively low. And then we also look at the impact. How bad is it in real life this specific risk happens? So let's say we have a system that holds 1 million people's personal data, sensitive personal data. How bad is it if that system gets exposed to the public? Really bad. How bad is it if Markku from finance spills coffee in the morning for the business? Well, it's an acceptable risk. So as an architect, you'll be mapping out risks you can see across all of these layers that we talked about here that are currently not optimal, and trying to figure out which are the greatest risks overall. Once you figure that out, then you'll be pretty much ready to give some kind of opinion to, as an architect, what we should be doing. And the way you kind of give that opinion is you often make roadmaps. This is kind of what it all comes down to in the end. I make a lot of roadmaps. This is just an example. It's not real for any real organization, but it's inspired by a real one. So you remember the city again, you look at the big picture, you look at all kinds of different avenues of development that could be going on. Then you remember that there's a limited amount of people and a limited amount of money. And you try to suggest when we should be spending money on what and time and effort on and why. And you end up making roadmaps like this. Now, they never actually, the secret here is that roadmaps are never actually executed 100%. And we, as an architect, you revise these every X months to reflect the changing world. But you need to predict ahead. So you're not just randomly selecting stuff to do, but rather prioritizing what's most important. And seeing what else is going on at the same time, because often the same people, especially in smaller organizations, might be required to take part in like 5 different things at once, which is too much for any single person. So we need to prioritize. If you want to take something to your everyday work, a good architect is a lazy architect, just like a good admin is a lazy admin. What I really like to do and what I'd like to suggest you do is start templating things. When you design a solution one time, like I have here, this is a kind of altered version of a real solution design for a certain thing. I have a ready-made template to go. I build everything, I build all the plans in a way where I can take that plan and then start from that, not from scratch, but from a ready-made plan with a new, let's say, project or a new customer. And I have a well-made plan ready. So the more you template, the more you refine those templates and then use those in your work, you're going to save a lot of time. That's how an architect thinks. You don't want to start from scratch. You want to use those frameworks. Frameworks are essentially templates. You want to make your own templates and use them all the time. That way you can spend more time thinking and less time writing stuff into Excel. This is another example. When I had templated this kind of planning session based on my experience, the actual session ended up taking 45 minutes instead of 4 hours. So I promised we'd get back to the video game. Here we are. Wherever you are working, whatever you're working on right now, if you're looking for a job, if you're working on one, looking to get a leg up in life, move into cybersecurity, the thing I would, from an architect's point of view, I would suggest is you try to understand what's going on around the thing you're working on right now, to see the big picture, even if you don't understand it deeply. Because that is really valuable to you being able to open your mouth in situations where other people who are only focused on a point solution, like the single airplane you see up there, to help other people around you understand how what you're doing is affecting everyone else and everything else around you in security, and what else we should look at. Because there's someone only working on the airplane is the only thing that matters. But there's really a whole lot of else going on around you in security as well. Yeah, we're pretty much at time right now, so we're gonna finish here. If you have any questions, comments, you wanna connect with me on LinkedIn, anywhere else, I have a blog up as well. Feel free to scan the QR code. This is kind of funny as a security person putting a QR code. This is not one of those bad ones. You have me on recording right now showing you this, so if it's a bad one, I'm gonna get caught. But thank you. Kiitos.
Thank you so much, Tatu. Thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you. I appreciate this. Have a good one.